Okay, tell me about your first group of paintings.
This series here was the first series which I did in my first year of IB. I started off with green. It was the first in my series titled A Primary Understanding. And I started off by really wanting to explore texture and color.
So this piece with the blue background is titled Green.
Yeah.
Can you tell me why?
The series is titled A Primary Understanding because I really began to use and try to understand primary colors and make sure that I could work them all into my piece here. And I didn't use anything besides red and yellow and blue in this one.
Okay.
Those were the only paints that I used, and I titled it Green, knowing that it's not a primary color, but because I use green a lot throughout the face here.
Okay.
It's loosely based on a self-portrait of myself, and I was a little bit uneasy about titling it yellow, so I went with green opposed to...
Why are you uneasy about giving it yellow as a title?
I have jaundice issues. I'm kind of sensitive about calling myself yellow.
Okay. All right. And so loosely based on Chuck Close, you said.
Yeah.
What are your Chuck Close influences with this piece?
Definitely just the portrait part of it. I'm very interested in the way that he captures someone's face. He doesn't let much else into his piece besides a face. And that's what I wanted to depict in this piece as well, as just a bold statement of someone's face.
Okay, good. I'm going to let you just continue talking about your three paintings in your first series.
Okay.
Okay?
So the first one that I did, I was very interested in texture. So in the background, by using a 1-inch brush, I just built up a little bit of texture. It was nothing I had done before, and I wasn't exactly sure how it would look or how I could create more or what I could add to acrylics to make it thicker or harder. And so this was just kind of the beginning of the texture that I continued to use.
Later on in the course?
Later on in the course,
okay.
and even in the series that I continued
in
to
the
use.
series, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So in my other two ones, which are of much smaller scale than the first one, I used a painting knife, and only a painting knife.
And what are you painting on in these three paintings? What's your ground?
Masonite, which is standard hardboard.
Okay, so tell me about the process of developing the two smaller pieces. What's the title at the top?
The title is Blue for the top piece there. And
why is it titled Blue?
her hair is blue.
Okay, so I'm just going to let you continue.
And so how I started this piece, I definitely learned quite a lot from both of those because I had never worked with a painting knife before. So I started by just lightly, I guess, spreading paint like you would on a piece of toast.
With a knife?
With a knife, yeah.
Okay.
Over the board. And I eventually built it up with a couple of different layers. And when you take a look at it, you can tell the colors that I used and the way that I built up the colors on it.
Okay, you've also built up value. Were you mixing your colors on the canvas or on a palette?
I was mixing them on a palette, and then I would mix to get the color that I wanted.
Yes.
And then I would work with the paints when they were still a little bit wet and mix them together. I find that when I apply wet paint to a dried paint surface, it doesn't take as well. So I really had to work with things like the face with it all wet. So this is the second series which I did. It is a narrative series. It starts with myself, and it's a story about how I grow up, but I always want to stay my little self. And the little girl in the little pink dress that follows through the whole story is myself growing up, but still being my little self at the same time. So for this series, there's 8 of them. They are all done on the same Masonite board and are all done with another painting knife. I didn't touch a paintbrush this whole series, and I definitely learned quite a lot.
Okay, tell me about what you learned.
Just a lot about how to use the brush, the best way to cover the board itself, the best way to layer color and to use color, how to create shadows and how to make depth. You can definitely see from my first to my last the huge amount of progression which I have made.
Okay. Can you be more specific about, okay, so for example, you said depth was one of the things that you increased your understanding of.
Mm-hmm.
Could you point that out, comparing to?
Just the way that I used, I think, a light source.
In which one?
Definitely my last one. I think it's most prominent.
In what areas?
In just places like the way that the light hits the house, the old self and my little self.
Okay, good.
Just the way that I was able to use shading for sure. As you can see in my first one, there's not a whole lot of color value.
So you've got a wider color value as you progress?
Absolutely.
Which colors in particular were you able to gain a better understanding of when it comes to value?
Definitely, I think my reds and my whites. Whites are relatively hard, I find, to create a lot of value for.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about this series?
I think that it was incredibly important to me, this series, because after every piece which I finished, I took the time to think about how I could improve the next and how I could expand my knowledge based on what I had just done with that piece. And I think that's what helped me progress so far between the first piece and the last piece, was because I took that time to learn and to understand what I was doing, how I was doing it, and I taught myself how to better control the medium that I'm using.
Okay, let's talk about your next group of paintings in terms of investigation in your sketchbook.
Okay. So for this one, for the investigation, I decided to take pictures just so I could have something in terms of reference to further help me understand the forms and the concepts of a human face, particularly a male face, which I don't get the pleasure of looking at every day. So what I decided to do was I took all 4 of my pictures here. I did them in a room here at the school. I turned off all the lights. I had a couple of light sources, rather bright lights, just so I could get some different shadows, which would really help with the depth throughout the paintings, and just so I could have some good contrast to work with. So this one as well, it was a little bit, I really switched up the way that I used the lighting. This one was from underneath, the light source was from down here, so it added for some very interesting shadows through here for sure. And these 2 as well. This one was very spot on, so there was a little bit less contrast to work with. And this one here was also from the side.
Okay, is there anything else in your sketchbook that you want to talk about?
I have quite a lot of color exploration. I planned out the way that I wanted to do it, for sure, how I wanted to do it.
I noticed some color swatches in your sketchbook next to the photos.
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose there?
These ones, I just wanted to figure out what colors I could use or wanted or was interested in using.
Okay.
So what I did was I started off with a couple of what I called main colors, and then from there went on to their complementary colors. I know that these aren't necessarily in order.
In what order? What do you mean by in order?
Well, in the end, like the purple here or the yellow here went with the purple, which is up here. I guess it would have been better if they were straight across from each other.
Okay, I understand. All right. Anything else in the sketchbook that shows exploration, investigation for your next group?
I have quite a lot of gridding and sketches of what I was going to put on my board and how I wanted to once again depict their faces and how I wanted to do it. I have a couple of ideas which I kind of threw around and thought out. I planned out how I wanted my lights to look, how I wanted my light sources to work with the color contrasts and the shadows. And I also have some other color explorations and color concepts that I never ended up using.
Okay, good. Tell me about the paintings.
These ones are what was a part of the sketchbook exploration. So this is the final product of what I was planning for.
So tell me about your color decisions here.
As you can see, they are the primary colors. I was very interested in understanding how they work together and how they look together. So this is the last series which I did during my first year of IB. It's titled Cannibal Bottles.
Okay, how did you come to that title?
I was sitting in a car in California playing with my apple juice, and I ripped off the label and shoved it inside the bottle and thought it was funny because it ate itself.
So the bottle ate the label.
Yeah.
The bottle was eating itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I understand.
And then I kind of figured out how that bottle ate its label and how I wish that more people could maybe eat their own labels.
Interesting.
Then it kind of became a emotional representation to myself about how this is something that I'd want to eat.
Okay.
I have labels in life.
So you've got a message. There's a lot of content to these two paintings. Tell me how these two paintings illustrate what you've learned through your first year.
Okay. I started almost the same way that I did with my first series, using an artist's knife, because I went back to the painter's knife with this one as well. So I did the butter on toast knife deal on the Masonite, and from there I used a brush and I went over the texture with the yellows and the greens in the background to really bring out the texture, so it would grab kind of the hard and dry paint, and it would emphasize the bumps and the grooves. And then from there, I used the knife again to create the tables that these bottles are on. So the red and the green are done with a knife, and I think that this really shows how much I've learned in my first IB year when it comes to blending and shading just in those tables. I began by being very inspired by a New Orleans artist. Her name is Kelly Quarry Vernon, and she does things which are relatively similar to what I have done here.
In what sense similar?
She uses the gesso on canvas, like I did.
How did you use the gesso?
I mixed gesso and modeling paste, so that's kind of where we separate in terms of our medium for sure.
Okay.
Just so I can get a little bit more texture. She works on a much larger scale than these two, or these three here, and so she develops her texture a little bit different than I did, and I wanted big texture with very obvious lines and grooves, opposed to the little textures that she does.
Okay.
I wanted this because she usually works with African American subjects, and so seeing her texture in her charcoal is easier because she usually has those darker tones and the contrast in there, which I lack to an extent. So I once again started this by taking photos. I decided to revisit this, and from the first time that I took photos, I had learned a lot in terms of what I want in my photo and the amount of contrast that I want and how I want the lighting to be set up. So I rented this very dark room. It had no windows, nothing, and when I turned off the light, it was pitch black. And so I found these big, bright lights. They were very, very bright, and I positioned them with one beside the face and one kind of in front, but not quite in front, not blinding. They were very, very long, bald. They are car guys who work for my dad. So,
what are car guys? I'm sorry. I don't understand.
That's okay. They do like detailing and they take apart the car. From there, I took home the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I edited them a little bit so that I could.
How did you edit them?
I just changed the contrast and the brightness a little bit.
Okay.
I definitely wanted some dark shadows and some very highlighted skin for sure.
Okay.
Just so I could have that contrast again.
Okay. And which one did you do first?
I started with Leo. So
Can you indicate, please?
This one here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what did you learn on this first one?
Not to go too dark, for sure.
Okay. What you mean not to go too dark?
To really stretch out my values.
Okay.
You don't need complete black and complete white everywhere. For this one, I kind of figured out how I wanted to apply my gesso and my modeling paste to have the best textures.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely gave me an idea of how it was going to affect the textures, because there are grooves and bumps which are going to grab the charcoal more or less than I had expected.
Right.
So I really figured out the way that the charcoal will get stuck in things like grooves.
Which of the three do you think is your strongest?
Definitely Josh. So that is this one here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's my strongest because, like I was talking about, I really stretched my values. You can definitely see the way that I used the light grays to the medium grays to the dark grays to just the dark blacks. And using this value appropriately definitely created lots of form and really developed the content for me.
Did you learn something about photography for portraits?
Absolutely. As you can see in there's a big range of contrast through these ones, and Jesse here, so this is the middle one, he really lacks a lot of deep shadows and bright highlights, and because of that I really struggle with this one because of that lack of contrast. It was very difficult for me to be able to develop the form.
So what would you have done differently in the photograph?
I would have had one light probably very much closer to his face, so I could develop some more light.
Okay.
And then I think I would have moved the second light further away, so that way he would have some darker shadows. So this is my final piece, which I did in my final year of IB.
Your final series?
My final series, yes.
Okay.
I didn't mean to call it a piece. So this one is very personal to myself. It's showing myself descending, and I've titled this series Descending because I feel as if I have pulled myself out of the clouds and I've come down and I've landed on Earth. And I had a bit of a realization because I was sitting in my car thinking about how I am going to be planted here. My feet are going to be in the ground of this city, and I'm going to have to get a job here and go to school here. I'm nowhere else except for here. And this is expressing how I feel about being here, and
Okay, so you're talking about expressing yourself
Mm-hmm.
and conveying a message.
Mm-hmm.
What elements of art did you use to express your message?
Um, I think that a lot of my color content helped express my message. As you can see, she's falling, you know, and she's coming down to the ground, and you understand
What
that.
lets us know that she's falling? I don't think it's immediately apparent that she's falling. Tell me, what is it that you've done that shows us that she's fallen?
I tried to use kind of the sky as a way to show. So it starts off a little bit brighter, and then it slowly fades to the darker reds and purples as she gets further away from the sun.
Okay. What is your medium and what are your tools that you're using here?
For this one, I used a brush, a paint knife as well in terms of tools. I used acrylic paint and modeling paste.
Okay.
So for this one, all three of them, I would use the modeling paste on her body where it's white. And I would make an effort to create high points and low points that I could later go over with a brush to create a texture on her body.
All right, so as you look at your body of work that you've created over the last 2 years, which piece or group of pieces do you feel the strongest personal connection to?
Quite a lot of them. I know that's a terrible answer.
All of them?
There's some which are personal to myself because they are emotional pieces or narrative in terms of my life. But I'm also very connected to some of the pieces because they're people that I know.